The 8-year-old called me daddy. The 16-year-old covered for his cheating mother. When I found $47,000 missing from our savings and her secret emails spanning 2 years, I knew staying would kill me. So I vanished without a word. My name is Daniel Harris. I'm 44 years old, and I work as an industrial parts distributor for manufacturing companies scattered across the Midwest. It's solid, dependable work that pays well, but it means I'm on the road 3, sometimes 4 days a week visiting clients in Michigan, Indiana, Ohio, checking their inventory needs, negotiating contracts, closing deals. I've been doing it for nearly 2 decades now. Build up a reputation for reliability and results. I'm good at what I do. Real good. I met Jennifer at a charity fundraiser in Columbus, Ohio, back in the fall of 2013. The event was one of those rubber chicken dinner affairs where local businesses pretend to care about community causes while networking. I wasn't particularly interested in being there, but my company had bought a table, so I showed up. That's when I saw her standing near the silent auction table, her dark hair pulled back in a loose ponytail, wearing this burgundy dress that seemed to glow under the venue lights. She had 2 kids with her, a tiny girl, maybe 3 years old, clutching her hand and staring wide-eyed at everything, and a preteen boy slouched beside her looking thoroughly bored and annoyed. I approached, made some small talk about the auction items, and within minutes we were deep in conversation. Her name was Jennifer, 36 at the time, and she worked in marketing for a regional healthcare company. She was a single mother, doing it all on her own. The kid's father had been unreliable from the start, more absent than present, eventually disappearing entirely about a year before we met. She didn't say it with bitterness, just stated it as fact, like she'd long since made peace with doing everything solo. I was drawn to her immediately. Not just her looks, though she was beautiful, but her strength. The way she balanced career and kids without complaint, the way she laughed easily despite carrying so much weight. We exchanged numbers that night, and within 2 weeks we were dating. Within 6 months, we were inseparable. Lily, the little girl who'd been 3 when we met, took to me right away. She'd run to the door when I came over, arms outstretched, squealing Danny, in that precious little voice that melted my heart every single time. I'd scoop her up, spin her around, and she'd giggle like I'd just performed magic. Brandon, though, was a different story. Even at 11 years old, he watched me with suspicion, like I was some intruder trying to replace someone he barely remembered but still resented me for not being. I told myself he'd warm up eventually. Kids need time, right? We got married in a small ceremony in the spring of 2014, just family and a few close friends. I moved into her house in the suburbs of Columbus, a modest 3-bedroom ranch with a backyard that desperately needed work. I didn't mind. I threw myself into being the husband she deserved and the father figure those kids needed. I coached Lily's soccer team on Saturday mornings, helped Brandon with his algebra homework even when he rolled his eyes and huffed at every explanation I gave, made sure Jennifer had everything she needed to keep thriving in her career. For the first couple of years, it felt good. It felt right. I thought we were building something solid, something that would last. But by late 2017, things started changing. Subtle at first, then undeniable. By late 2017, the woman I married started to feel like a stranger living in my house. Jennifer's work schedule became increasingly erratic, unpredictable in ways that didn't quite add up no matter how hard I tried to make sense of it. She'd leave for the office at 7 in the morning and wouldn't return until 9 or 10 at night, sometimes even later. When I'd ask about her day, she'd give me vague responses about client meetings and project deadlines, her eyes never quite meeting mine. "It's just a really demanding quarter," Jennifer would say, her voice tired but dismissive. "Once we launch this campaign, things will settle down." But things never settled down. If anything, they got worse. I was traveling a lot myself during this period, visiting manufacturing plants in Detroit, Cleveland, Indianapolis, sometimes staying overnight when the meetings ran long. I'd call home in the evenings, wanting to hear her voice, to feel connected despite the distance. More often than not, she wouldn't answer. When she finally called back hours later, she'd say she'd been in a meeting, her phone on silent, too busy to check it. The intimacy between us dried up completely. We went from making love regularly to maybe once a month, and even then it felt mechanical, like she was just going through the motions to keep me from asking questions. When I tried to initiate anything, she'd claim exhaustion, headaches, stress from work. I tried to be understanding, told myself that careers sometimes demand everything you've got, and there's nothing left for anything else. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. I could feel in my gut that instinctive warning system that men ignore at their own peril. The kids noticed too, especially Lily. She was 7 by then, old enough to sense tension even if she couldn't articulate it. She climbed into my lap while I watched TV and asked, "Why is Mommy always gone, Danny?" Her big brown eyes would search my face for answers I didn't have. "She's working really hard, sweetheart," I'd tell her, smoothing her hair. "She's doing important things." Brandon, on the other hand, seemed almost pleased by the distance between Jennifer and me. He'd smirk when she'd brush past me without a word, or when she'd take a phone call and disappear into the bedroom for an hour. At 15, he'd grown more hostile toward me, more openly disrespectful. When I tried to enforce any kind of household rule, like curfews or limits on video game time, he'd snap back with, "You're not my father," his voice dripping with contempt. "I know I'm not your father, Brandon," I'd respond, keeping my voice level. "But I am an adult in this house, and you will show respect." He'd laugh, a cruel sound that reminded me just how much he resented my presence. Jennifer never backed me up in these moments. She'd either ignore the confrontations entirely, or tell me privately that I was being too hard on him, that he was just going through a phase. One Friday evening in December, I came home early from a trip to Fort Wayne. My last meeting had been canceled, and I'd driven straight through, eager to surprise Jennifer, maybe take her out to dinner, try to reconnect. When I pulled into the driveway at 6:30, her car was already there, which surprised me since she'd been coming home so late. I walked in through the garage, calling out her name. "Jennifer? Hey, I'm home early." No response. The house was quiet except for the sound of the TV in the living room where Brandon was sprawled on the couch, his eyes glued to some violent video game. He barely glanced at me when I walked past. "Where's your mom?" I asked him. Brandon shrugged, without looking away from the screen. "Upstairs. On the phone." Again. I climbed the stairs, my footsteps heavy on the carpeted steps. I could hear her voice coming from our bedroom, low and intimate, the kind of tone you don't use for work calls. I stopped outside the door, my hand on the knob, and listened. "I miss you too," Jennifer was saying, her voice soft, almost tender. I know. It's hard, but we have to be careful." My blood ran cold. I stood there frozen, every instinct screaming at me to burst through that door and demand answers. But something held me back. Maybe I wasn't ready to face it yet. Maybe I needed more proof before I shattered everything. I turned and walked back downstairs, my heart pounding in my chest, my mind racing with thoughts I didn't want to think. That was the moment everything changed. I spent that entire weekend in a fog, my mind replaying that phone conversation over and over. "I miss you too. We have to be careful." Those words echoed in my head during every moment of silence. Every time Jennifer walked past me without meeting my eyes. Every time she claimed she had to run errands alone. On Monday morning, February 5th, everything came into sharp focus. I was supposed to leave for a 3-day trip to Milwaukee, meetings with a major client about a new supply contract. Jennifer knew my schedule by heart. She'd even mentioned that morning at breakfast, in front of the kids, how she'd probably work late all week since I'd be gone anyway. But as I loaded my overnight bag into my truck, something inside me rebelled. I couldn't leave. Not without knowing the truth. I pulled out of the driveway like normal, drove to the end of our street, then circled back and parked 3 houses down where I had a clear view of our home. I called my client, made up an excuse about a family emergency, and rescheduled everything for the following week. Then I waited. 2 hours passed. At 10:30, Jennifer's car backed out of the driveway. I followed at a distance, my heart hammering against my ribs. She didn't head toward her office downtown. Instead, she drove to a shopping center on the west side, pulled into the parking lot of a mid-range hotel I'd driven past 100 times without ever really noticing it. I parked several rows back and watched. Jennifer sat in her car for a few minutes, checking her phone, fixing her hair in the rearview mirror. Then a silver BMW pulled up beside her. A man stepped out, tall, maybe late 30s, wearing expensive clothes that screamed money. He walked over to her car, opened her door, and Jennifer stepped out smiling in a way that made my stomach turn. They embraced. Not a friendly hug, a lover's embrace. His hands on her lower back, her arms around his neck, their bodies pressed together. Then he kissed her, long and deep, right there in the parking lot like they didn't have a care in the world. I sat there gripping my steering wheel so hard my knuckles went white, my breath coming in short, sharp bursts. Part of me wanted to jump out, confront them both right there, demand answers. But I didn't. I needed to see it all, needed to know exactly what I was dealing with. They walked into the hotel together, his arm around her waist, her laughing at something he said. I waited 5 minutes, then followed them inside. The lobby was generic and forgettable, designed for anonymity. I watched from behind a newspaper stand as they got into the elevator, watched the numbers climb to the 3rd floor. I couldn't go up there. I couldn't watch them walk into a room together. I'd seen enough. My marriage was over, and I'd just watched it die in a hotel parking lot on a Monday morning. I walked back to my truck, sat behind the wheel, and for the first time in 20 years, I broke down. Not loud, dramatic sobs, but silent tears that I couldn't control, my chest heaving with a pain I'd never experienced before. The woman I'd built a life with, the woman I'd given everything to, had just walked into a hotel room with another man without a shred of hesitation or guilt. After 20 minutes, I pulled myself together. I started the engine and drove, not home but to a bar on the outskirts of town, a dive place I'd passed countless times but never entered. It was barely noon, but I needed a drink, and I needed to think without Lily's innocent questions or Brandon's smug looks. The bartender, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes, poured me a whiskey without judgment. "Rough day?" she asked. "You could say that," I replied, my voice hoarse. I sat there for an hour, nursing that drink, my mind racing through options. Confront Jennifer immediately? Gather more evidence? Talk to a lawyer first? Every option felt impossible, each one requiring me to admit that my marriage had been a lie. By the time I left that bar, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I was done. I wasn't going to beg, wasn't going to ask her to choose me, wasn't going to humiliate myself trying to save something she'd already destroyed. I was going to leave, quietly and completely, on my own terms. But first, I needed a plan. The next 2 weeks were the hardest of my life. I went through the motions, traveling for work, coming home, sitting at the dinner table with Jennifer and the kids like nothing had changed. But inside, I was methodically planning my exit. I couldn't confront Jennifer. Every time I thought about it, I pictured her denying everything, gaslighting me into thinking I was crazy or paranoid, maybe even turning the kids against me completely. Brandon would love that opportunity. So instead, I started gathering information quietly, carefully. I contacted a divorce attorney in Cleveland, someone far enough away that word wouldn't get back to Jennifer through mutual acquaintances. The lawyer, a sharp woman named Patricia Reynolds, laid out my options during a phone consultation while I sat in my truck outside a manufacturing plant. "Ohio's a no-fault divorce state," Patricia explained. "But documentation helps, especially regarding any financial impropriety. Check your joint accounts, credit cards, any unusual spending patterns." That evening, while Jennifer was supposedly at another late work meeting, I logged into our banking accounts. What I found made my blood boil. Over the past 18 months, there had been regular transfers from our joint savings account to an external account I didn't recognize. Small amounts at first, 500 here, 1,000 there, but they'd grown larger and more frequent. In total, nearly $47,000 had disappeared from the savings we'd been building to buy a bigger house. I took screenshots of everything, forwarded them to a private email account Jennifer didn't know about, and created a backup on a thumb drive I kept in my truck. The next discovery came purely by accident. Jennifer had left her laptop open on the kitchen counter one Saturday morning while she showered. I walked past it, saw her email was open, and stopped. I knew I shouldn't look, knew it was an invasion of privacy, but after what I'd seen, I didn't care about playing fair anymore. I scrolled through her sent messages quickly, my eyes catching on names I didn't recognize. Then I found them, emails to someone named David Thornton going back almost 2 years. The early ones were professional, discussing a marketing collaboration between their companies. But they quickly became personal, then intimate, then explicit. My hands shook as I read message after message detailing their affair, their hotel meetings, their plans to eventually be together once the timing was right. In one email from 3 months ago, Jennifer had written, "I know I should feel guilty about Daniel, but honestly, he's so oblivious. He travels so much he barely notices I'm gone. He's a good stepdad to the kids. I'll give him that. But I never felt the passion with him that I feel with you. I heard the shower turn off upstairs. I quickly forwarded a dozen of the most damning emails to my private account, cleared the browser history, and stepped away from the laptop just as Jennifer came down wrapped in a towel. "Good morning," she said brightly, like she hadn't just destroyed 4.5 years of my life. "What are you up to?" "Just making coffee," I replied evenly, my voice betraying nothing. "Want some?" "Sure, thanks," she said, already distracted by her phone. That afternoon, while Jennifer took Lily to a birthday party and Brandon was at a friend's house, I made my move. I packed a single duffel bag with clothes, essential documents, my laptop, and a backup drive with all the evidence I gathered. I cleaned out half the money from our joint checking account, exactly my share, and transferred it to a personal account I'd opened the week before. Then I sat down and wrote a letter. Short, direct, final. "Jennifer, I know about David. I know about the affair. I know about the money you've been stealing from our savings. By the time you read this, I'll be gone. My lawyer will be in touch regarding divorce proceedings. Don't try to contact me. We're done. Daniel." I placed the letter on the kitchen table next to my house keys and wedding ring. Then I walked out the door, got in my truck, and drove away from the only home I'd known for 4.5 years. I didn't look back. I drove for 6 hours straight that day, my mind numb, my hands steady on the wheel. I didn't have a destination at first, just knew I needed distance between me and that house, that life, that betrayal. Somewhere around the Kentucky border, I pulled into a rest stop and finally let myself feel the full weight of what I'd done. I'd left. I'd actually left. After 4.5 years of trying to be the man Jennifer and those kids needed, I'd walked away. Part of me felt like a failure, like I should have fought harder, demanded answers, made her choose. But a deeper, wiser part of me knew the truth. She'd already chosen, long before I discovered her secret. My phone had been buzzing nonstop since I left. 23 missed calls from Jennifer, 17 text messages that I didn't bother reading, and 3 voicemails I deleted without listening to. There was nothing she could say that would change what I knew, nothing that would make me turn around. But then I saw a text from Lily. "Danny, where are you? Mommy is crying, and Brandon says you're never coming back. Please come home." That one nearly broke me. I sat in my truck at that rest stop, staring at those words from an 8-year-old girl who didn't understand why the only father figure she'd really known had disappeared without saying goodbye. But I couldn't go back. Not for her. Not for anyone. I'd lose myself completely if I stayed. I typed out a response carefully. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. I love you very much, but I can't come back. Be good for your mom. You're the sweetest girl in the world." Then I blocked Jennifer's number. Cold, maybe, but necessary. I ended up in the Appalachian Mountains of eastern Tennessee, a small town called Crossville that I'd passed 3 years ago on a work trip. There was something about the mountains that called to me, the isolation, the quiet, the sense of starting over in a place where nobody knew my name or my story. I found an extended stay motel on the outskirts of town, nothing fancy but clean and cheap. The manager, a weathered man in his 60s named Frank, didn't ask questions when I paid cash for 2 weeks up front. I spent the first 3 days barely leaving that room, ordering takeout, staring at the ceiling, trying to process the implosion of my marriage. On the 4th day, I forced myself out. I couldn't hide forever. I needed a plan, needed to figure out what came next. I drove around the area, familiarizing myself with the landscape. That's when I found it. A small trailer on 5 acres of wooded land, listed for rent at a price I could easily afford. The owner, a retired veteran named Carl Mitchell, showed me around the property that same afternoon. "It's not much," Carl said as we walked the perimeter. 26-footer, needs some work on the deck, but it's solid. Quiet out here. Private. Good place for a man who needs to clear his head. "How'd you know I needed to clear my head?" I asked. Carl smiled knowingly. "I've seen that look before. Wore it myself about 15 years back when my ex-wife decided the grass was greener elsewhere. Spent 2 years up here, putting myself back together." He gestured toward the mountains, rising in the distance. "These mountains have a way of healing a man, if he lets them." I took the place on the spot, signed a month-to-month lease, and moved in the next day. It was sparse, just the basics, but it was mine. No memories of Jennifer, no reminders of the life I tried to build, no ghosts haunting the corners. Over the next 2 weeks, I established a routine. Mornings I'd wake early, make coffee on the small stove, and sit on the deck watching the sun rise over the ridgeline. The silence was profound, almost startling after years of living with the constant noise of family life. But I grew to crave it, that quiet space where I could think without interruption. I stayed in touch with my clients remotely, told them I was dealing with a family situation and working from a different location temporarily. Most were understanding. The ones who weren't, I let go. My job had been my identity for so long, but now it felt like just a way to pay bills while I figured out who I was supposed to be. Carl checked on me occasionally, bringing firewood or just stopping by to share a beer and conversation. He never pried, never asked direct questions about why I'd ended up here, but he offered wisdom when it seemed needed. Betrayal changes a man, Carl said one evening as we sat by a fire pit he'd helped me build. Makes you question everything you thought you knew about people, about yourself, but also clarifies things. Shows you what you're really made of. What am I made of? I asked, half joking. You're still figuring that out, Carl replied. But you didn't fall apart. You didn't beg or rage or destroy yourself. You walked away with your dignity intact. That takes strength most men don't have. His words settled over me like a blanket. Maybe he was right. Maybe leaving wasn't weakness. Maybe it was the strongest thing I'd ever done. 6 weeks after I'd left, the paperwork arrived. Jennifer had filed for divorce, which didn't surprise me, but her demands did. She wanted the house, full equity. She wanted half my retirement account. She wanted continued health insurance coverage for herself and both kids. She even had the audacity to request spousal support for 3 years while she transitioned. I met with Patricia Reynolds, my attorney, in her Cleveland office during one of my work trips north. She reviewed the documents with a practiced eye, her expression neutral, but her tone sharp. She's overreaching, Patricia said flatly. You were only married 4.5 years. There's documented infidelity on her part, and she's been stealing marital funds. We can fight most of these demands. I don't want to fight, I said, surprising myself. I just want it over. Patricia looked at me carefully. I understand the desire for closure, Daniel, but don't let her take advantage of your exhaustion. You have rights here. We negotiated for weeks. I agreed to let Jennifer keep the house, since it had been hers before we married. I agreed to cover the kids' health insurance for another year, even though they weren't biologically mine. But I fought her on spousal support, on the retirement accounts, on everything else. By early April, we'd reached a settlement that felt as fair as anything could in this situation. The divorce would be final in 60 days. Meanwhile, life in Tennessee continued its quiet rhythm. I'd started hiking the local trails, pushing myself physically in ways I hadn't in years. The exertion helped clear my mind, helped me sleep at night when the thoughts wouldn't stop spiraling. I met other hikers occasionally, exchanged pleasantries, but mostly kept to myself. One Saturday morning in late April, I was on a particularly steep trail when I came across a woman struggling with a flat tire on her mountain bike. She was maybe mid-30s, athletic build, cursing creatively at the stubborn tire. Need a hand? I called out. She looked up, relief flooding her face. I wouldn't say no. This thing's been fighting me for 20 minutes. I crouched down and helped her work the tire free, our conversation flowing easily as we worked. Her name was Amanda. She'd moved to the area a year ago from Charlotte, escaping her own messy divorce and starting fresh. Something about these mountains, Amanda said as we finished up. They give you space to breathe, you know? Yeah, I agreed. I know exactly what you mean. We ended up hiking together that day, talking about our lives, our mistakes, our hopes for whatever came next. It wasn't romantic, wasn't anything more than two people who understood what it meant to rebuild from ruins. But it felt good to connect with someone, to remember that not everyone was a liar or a cheat. Over the following weeks, Amanda and I became friends. We'd meet up for hikes, grab coffee at the local diner, share stories about our respective disasters. She never pushed for more, seemed to understand that I wasn't ready for anything beyond friendship, and I appreciated that more than I could express. But then, one afternoon in early May, everything shifted again. I was at the small post office in town, picking up a package when I saw Brandon. My stepson, the kid who'd hated me from day one, standing outside a gas station across the street. He looked older somehow, harder, his teenage swagger replaced with something more calculating. He saw me at the same moment I saw him. Our eyes locked across the street, and I watched recognition flash across his face, followed immediately by that familiar sneer. He started walking toward me deliberately, and I knew this confrontation was unavoidable. "Well, look who it is," Brandon said as he approached, his voice dripping with contempt. "The great Daniel Harris, hiding in the mountains like a coward." I kept my voice level. "What are you doing here, Brandon?" "Mom sent me to find you," he said, crossing his arms. Though I told her it was a waste of time. Once a quitter, always a quitter, right? Something inside me snapped. Not rage, but clarity. "I'm not doing this with you. Whatever your mother wants, she can communicate through lawyers. Lily cries every night asking for you," Brandon said, and for a moment I saw something almost human in his eyes. "But you don't care about that, do you? You only cared about yourself." "Your mother made her choices," I replied. "I made mine. That's all there is to it." Brandon laughed bitterly. "Yeah, keep telling yourself that. You're just like every other guy who walked out on us. At least my real dad had the excuse of being a screw-up. What's yours?" I looked at this angry kid, this teenager who'd spent years resenting me, and felt nothing but pity. "I hope you figure things out, Brandon. I really do. But I'm done being your punching bag." I turned and walked away, got in my truck, and drove back to the trailer. My hands were shaking, not from fear or anger, but from the realization that I'd finally, truly let go. Seeing Brandon, hearing his accusations, none of it moved me the way it would have months ago. That evening, Carl stopped by with a six-pack, and we sat on the deck watching the sun set. "Saw you had a visitor earlier," Carl said casually. "Everything all right?" "Ghosts from the past," I replied. "But ghosts can't hurt you unless you let them." Carl nodded approvingly. "Sounds like you're learning." 3 months in my new life in Tennessee, I'd settled into a rhythm that felt surprisingly sustainable. Work was manageable remotely. The mountains provided endless opportunities for reflection and physical challenge, and Amanda had become a genuine friend whose company I valued without complication. I was healing, slowly but surely. Then my father called. We hadn't spoken much since I'd left Ohio, just a few brief check-ins where I'd assured him I was fine and dealing with things. But this call was different. His voice carried a weight I hadn't heard before. "Daniel, I need to tell you something," Dad said. "Something I should have told you years ago." I sat down on my deck, the evening sun casting long shadows across the trees. "What is it?" He took a deep breath. "Your mother wasn't my first wife. I was married before, to a woman named Sandra. We had 2 kids together, her children from a previous relationship. I tried to be their father, tried to make it work for almost 5 years. I felt something shift in my chest. I never knew that. Sandra had an affair," Dad continued, his voice rough with old pain, "with her ex-husband, the kid's biological father. He'd been in and out of prison, unreliable, but she went back to him anyway. I found out, tried to salvage things for the kid's sake, but eventually I realized I was killing myself trying to save something she'd already destroyed." "So you left," I said quietly. "I left," he confirmed. "Hardest thing I ever did. Those kids, especially the younger one, she was attached to me. Call me daddy. Breaking her heart by walking away nearly broke me too, but staying would have destroyed me completely." I sat there holding the phone, tears streaming down my face. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I see you going through the same thing, and I want you to know you're not weak for leaving. You're not a failure. Sometimes the strongest thing a man can do is walk away from a situation that's killing him, even when it means hurting people you care about. I met your mother 2 years after I left Sandra. Built a real life. Had you, found actual happiness. You'll find that too, son." We talked for another hour, him sharing details he'd kept buried for decades, me finally understanding where my strength to leave had come from. It was in my blood, this ability to choose self-preservation over martyrdom. After we hung up, I sat on that deck until full darkness fell, processing this revelation. My father had walked the same path I was walking now, had made the same impossible choice, and had survived to build something better. If he could do it, so could I. The next morning, I received an email from Patricia. The divorce was final. Jennifer had signed a settlement agreement, and as of that moment, we were legally no longer married. I felt relief mixed with residual sadness, but mostly I felt free. I forwarded the email to Amanda with a simple message: "It's done." She showed up at my trailer an hour later with a bottle of decent whiskey and 2 glasses. We sat on the deck, toasted to endings and new beginnings, and talked about what came next. "You gonna stay here?" Amanda asked. "For now," I said. "Maybe permanently. I like the quiet. Like who I'm becoming here." "Good," she said, clinking her glass against mine. "The mountains suit you." That afternoon, Carl stopped by with unexpected news. "Got a buddy selling a piece of land about 10 miles from here," he said. 15 acres, has a small house that needs work, but the bones are solid. Creek running through it. Incredible views. Thought you might be interested. I drove out to see you the next day, and the moment I stepped onto that property, I knew this was where I'd rebuild. Not just a temporary escape, but a permanent foundation for whatever life I was building next. I made an offer that week, but just when I thought I'd turned the corner completely, the past reached out again. I received a letter, forwarded from my old address in Ohio. It was from Lily, written in careful 8-year-old handwriting. "Dear Danny, I miss you very much. Mommy says you're not coming back, but I hope you will. Brandon says you left because you didn't love us, but I don't believe him. I still have a soccer trophy you gave me. I look at it every night and remember when you coached my team. I love you. Please write back. Love, Lily." I sat there reading that letter over and over, my heart shattering and healing simultaneously. I couldn't go back, but I couldn't ignore her either. So I wrote back, carefully explaining in words an 8-year-old might understand that sometimes adults have to make hard choices, that I did love her but couldn't be part of her family anymore, that she should keep being the amazing kid she was. I mailed it the next day, knowing it was probably a mistake, but unable to leave her letter unanswered. By late June, I'd purchased the property Carl had shown me and begun the process of renovating the small house that came with it. The work was therapeutic, giving me something tangible to build while I rebuilt myself internally. I'd hired local contractors for the major structural repairs, but did much of the cosmetic work myself, painting, refinishing floors, replacing fixtures. Amanda helped when she could, and our friendship had deepened into something more, though we were taking it slowly. Neither of us was ready to rush into anything, both carrying scars from our respective divorces, but there was potential there for something real when the timing was right. One Saturday morning in early July, I was replacing the deck railing on my new property when a car pulled up the long driveway. I didn't recognize the vehicle, but when the door opened and Jennifer stepped out, my stomach dropped. She looked different, thinner, older somehow, her hair shorter than I remembered. She stood there for a moment, just staring at me, before walking closer. "Hello, Daniel," Jennifer said, her voice tentative. I set down my tools and wiped my hands on my jeans. "What are you doing here, Jennifer?" "I need to talk to you," she said. "I've been looking for you for weeks. Brandon told me where you were, but I had to hire a private investigator to find this specific location." "We have nothing to talk about," I replied evenly. "The divorce is final. Everything's settled." "Not everything," Jennifer said, her eyes welling with tears. "I made a terrible mistake, Daniel. David left me 2 months ago when I told him I was pregnant. Said he wasn't ready for that kind of commitment. I lost my job because the affair violated company policy. The house is going into foreclosure because I can't afford the mortgage alone. Everything's falling apart." I looked at this woman who'd once been my wife, who'd betrayed me without hesitation, who was now standing on my property asking for what? Sympathy? Help? A second chance? "I'm sorry you're struggling," I said, and I meant it. "But that's not my problem anymore. I know I hurt you," Jennifer continued, stepping closer. "I know I destroyed what we had, but I've been going to therapy, working on myself, trying to understand why I sabotaged everything good in my life. I want to make things right." "You can't make this right," I said firmly. "What's done is done. Don't you miss Lily?" Jennifer asked, and I saw the manipulation immediately. "She cries for you constantly. She doesn't understand why you abandoned her." "I didn't abandon her," I said, my voice hardening. "I left a marriage where I was being cheated on and stolen from. There's a difference." Jennifer's face shifted from pleading to angry. "So that's it. You're just going to hide up here in the mountains pretending you never had a family." "I never had a family with you," I replied coldly. "I had an illusion of one. You made sure of that when you spent 2 years sleeping with another man." "I made mistakes," Jennifer shouted. "People make mistakes, but you're supposed to fight for your marriage, not just run away like a coward." Something snapped inside me. A coward, I said, my voice low and dangerous. I spent 4.5 years fighting for a marriage you'd already abandoned. I raised your children while you were texting your lover. I worked my tail off to provide for a family you were betraying every single day. Don't you dare call me a coward for finally having enough self-respect to walk away. Jennifer opened her mouth to respond, but I wasn't finished. You want to talk about mistakes? Fine. Your mistake was thinking I'd be stupid enough to stay. Your mistake was underestimating my ability to survive without you. Your mistake was coming here thinking I'd cave because you're struggling with the consequences of your own choices. Please, Jennifer said, her voice breaking. I have nowhere else to turn. The kids need stability. Lily needs you. Lily needs a mother who makes better decisions, I said. And you need to figure your life out without using me as a safety net. We're done, Jennifer. Permanently. I've moved on, and you need to do the same. Have you moved on? Jennifer asked, her eyes narrowing as she looked toward my property. Is there someone else already? That's none of your business, I replied. But yes, I'm building a new life. One that doesn't include you or your drama. Jennifer stared at me for a long moment, and I watched the realization sink in that I meant every word. She wasn't going to manipulate me, wasn't going to guilt me, wasn't going to worm her way back into my life. I hope you're happy, she finally said, bitterness dripping from every word. I'm getting there, I replied. Now leave my property and don't come back. She turned and walked to her car, got in, and drove away without another word. I stood there watching until her car disappeared down the driveway, then sat down on the deck steps, my hands shaking from the adrenaline. Carl appeared from around the house a few minutes later. He'd been working on the other side of the property and had clearly heard everything. You handled that well, Carl said, sitting down beside me. Did I? I asked, suddenly unsure. You set boundaries. You didn't let her manipulate you. You stood your ground. That's exactly what you needed to do. Carl handed me a bottle of water. She'll try again eventually, or she'll send the kids to try. They always do. But you stay firm. You've earned your peace. I nodded, drinking the water, letting his words settle over me. He was right. I'd earned this peace, and I wasn't giving it up for anyone. Nearly 2 years had passed since I'd quietly left after discovering Jennifer's affair. The mountain property I'd purchased had been transformed from a fixer-upper into a real home, a place that reflected the man I'd become rather than the man I'd been trying to be. Amanda and I had grown closer over those months, our friendship evolving naturally into something deeper. We'd moved slowly, both carrying scars, but by the spring of the second year, she'd moved into the house with me. It felt right in a way my marriage to Jennifer never had. Honest, equal, built on truth rather than illusions. I was working on the barn one Saturday afternoon, converting it into a workshop, when a car appeared at the end of my long driveway. My stomach tightened with familiar dread, expecting Jennifer again. But when the door opened, it was Lily who stepped out. She was 10 now, taller, her features more defined but still carrying that sweetness I remembered. An older woman I didn't recognize, presumably her grandmother, stood beside the car watching. Danny, Lily called out tentatively. I set down my tools and walked toward her, my heart pounding. Hey, Lily. I wasn't sure you'd remember me, she said, her voice small. Of course I remember you, I replied, kneeling to her eye level. How could I forget the best soccer player I ever coached? She smiled, tears forming in her eyes. I wanted to see you. Grandma said she'd bring me if I promised not to ask you to come back. That was smart of her, I said gently. We sat on the porch steps, and she told me about school, her friends, how she'd joined a new soccer team. She didn't mention Jennifer much, and I didn't ask. After an hour, her grandmother called her back. Can I write to you sometimes? Lily asked as she stood to leave. I'd like that, I replied, giving her my email address. As I watched them drive away, Amanda came out and stood beside me. You okay? Yeah, I said, surprised to find I meant it. I think I am. That evening, I received an email from an address I didn't recognize. It was from Jennifer, but the tone was different from her previous desperate messages. She'd gotten help, was in therapy, had found a job in retail management. David's child, a daughter, was healthy. She wasn't asking for anything, just wanted to let me know she was trying to do better. I read it twice, then deleted it. Some doors, once closed, needed to stay that way. 4 months after Lily's visit, My life had settled into something I never expected to find: genuine contentment. Amanda and I had gotten engaged on a quiet evening on our porch, watching the sun set over the mountains. No drama, no grand gestures, just two people who'd found each other after their respective storms and decided to build something real together. Carl had become like family, stopping by most evenings to check progress on various projects or just share a beer and conversation. My work had evolved too. I'd built up enough of a client base in Tennessee that I rarely needed to travel anymore, conducting most business through video calls and occasional regional trips. One afternoon in late autumn, I drove into town for supplies and ran into someone I never expected to see: Brandon. He was standing outside a coffee shop, looking uncomfortable, like he'd been waiting for someone. When he saw me, his usual sneer was absent, replaced by something that looked like uncertainty. "Daniel," he said as I approached. "Brandon," I replied neutrally. "Can we talk?" he asked. "Just for a minute." We sat at an outdoor table, the October air crisp and cool. Brandon looked older than his 18 years, more worn down by life than any teenager should be. "I wanted to apologize," Brandon said, the words clearly difficult for him. "For how I treated you. For covering for Mom. For everything." I studied him carefully. "What changed?" "I'm in college now, living with my real dad," Brandon said. "Seeing how he is, how he treats people, made me realize what you were trying to do. You were trying to be a good stepdad, and I made it impossible." "Your mom made it impossible," I corrected gently. "You were just a kid caught in the middle." "Still," Brandon said, "you deserve better. Lily talks about you all the time. She really loved you." "I loved her too," I admitted. "Still do in a way. But I couldn't stay in that situation." "I get it now," Brandon said. "Anyway, I just wanted to say I'm sorry. And thank you for trying." After he left, I sat there for a while, feeling something shift. Forgiveness, maybe, or just acceptance that everyone was doing the best they could with what they had. That evening, Amanda found me on the porch, staring at the mountains. "You're thinking too hard," she observed. "Just reflecting," I said, pulling her close. "About how far I've come." "We've come," she corrected. "We've come," I agreed. Looking back, I understood why I'd quietly left after discovering my wife's affair after 4.5 years of marriage. Some men might have stayed, might have fought to save something already destroyed. But I'd chosen myself, chosen my dignity, chosen the possibility of real happiness over the certainty of prolonged misery. The mountains had healed me. Amanda had shown me what real partnership looked like. And in finding the strength to walk away, I'd found the strength to build something better. As darkness fell over the Tennessee hills, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: complete peace with my choices and genuine hope for tomorrow.